Alright, people, we're back again, and again, I apologise to everyone that I might have spoken to, inboxed, or chatted to on here. Been without an adapter for a while on my laptop, so it's slowed things down. And yeah, before I get something started, hold on a second. I've got this. Alright, hold on a second. Look, I understand if you don't want to be near Chuck, that's okay. Chuck, stop intimidating Tito. Tito, learn to be a man. Alright, you go over there and you go over there, and no funny business, alright guys? Okay, can I trust you while I do this video? Alright, good. Right, so what was I going to talk about? I was going to talk about Chael Sonnen. So there's been a lot of discussion about him after the John Jones fight. There's been so much discussion about Chael Sonnen since he started becoming more and more vocal and developed this, if you want to call it, persona, Chael P. Sonnen. And I think that I want to give my thoughts on that. And I think that my thoughts might not be too different from everybody else, but I want to get them out there because there's some other things that I think need to be linked to that. Now, what you have to understand is that I have followed most of, or the majority of, Chael's career. When I'm a fan of something, or a fan of like a sport, I will follow everything. Unfortunately, when I was a football fan, big time, I would watch Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, Vauxhall Conference when it was called that back in the day. Because I just wanted to watch as much as I can, and it's the same with MMA. So I was very familiar with Chael Sonnen when he was in the early UFC, well, like around the 50s, the UFC 50s. I remember he fought, I think it was Buffalo Sobral, and he was a light heavyweight. I knew about him on the independent circuit, underground MMA circuit, when he fought Forrest Griffin. I was very aware of him in the WEC, and that's where I became the most familiar with him. And in the WEC, he fought Paulo Filho. And obviously we know how those two fights went. Chael did very, very well in the first fight and then was caught in a submission. And then I kind of noticed the change in Chael Sonnen after that fight. That's just me. I noticed something in Chael slowly changing. And Chael, after that, had a rematch with Paulo much later on. And Chael won that fight. Paulo was not the same fighter anymore anyways. Eventually the WEC middleweights and the light heavyweights and the welterweights, I believe, all moved over to the UFC. And Chael fought at middleweight. And this is when I noticed again these things about Chael slowly developing and slowly changing. And I tell you what, the first hint that I noticed of this Chael Sonnen persona was on a Sherdog video, and I think it was with WEC, and he made that hilarious remark about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and not feeling comfortable with a grown man on top of him with his leg spread because he's a Republican and blah yada yada yada. Anyways, as we get into 2009, I felt I believe he beat Yushin Okami, and I believe he beat Dan Miller, and I believe he was now heading into the Nate Marquardt fight. And I'll never forget this. Marquardt was the heavy favourite because he just blasted Damian Maia in the first round with that nasty knockout power that he has, that punch. Knocked him out. Marquardt was believed to be the next guy. He was going to fight Anderson Silva. This match was just a formality, just to warm Marquardt up and to build the fight up. Chael was the sacrificial lamb. And I noticed when the press started coming around, we started to get the Chael Sonnen that we now know, the development of the Chael Sonnen that we now know. And Chael did interviews where he said things about Mark Coleman being a bum. He said things about Hammer House not being a real gym. He talked about Anderson Silva for the very first time, saying this guy's a liar, he doesn't come to fight, he's lied to you all. And I remember specifically in this one interview where he said, and I'll never forget this, he said, "When I'm done with Nate Marquardt and I sink my teeth into that bum, anything that you've heard me say before will pale in comparison, because he will get a verbal beating and he will be in tears and deserve every second of it." And it was that far after that comment, I was just like, oh, please, I hope Chael wins. I really want Chael to win. And I wasn't too confident, I wasn't too sure, and Chael put on the very dominant, very controlling performance over Nate Marquardt. This was one of those big fights where he didn't choke this time mentally. He actually persevered. He got put in a choke, he got out, he still won, really controlled Mark 1, and I felt actually came out with a credibility boost as a fighter. Then Chael started talking, and he was on Ariel Helwani's show, he was doing UFC Q&As, radio interviews, any interviews on YouTube, and Chael was extremely outspoken, and he was saying the most crazy things you could ever think of, saying the black belt from the Nogueira brothers is like getting a Happy Meal, with a toy of your Happy Meal, calling Anderson a dirtbag. This is the difference between me and all the other fighters. All of them want to compete, will go compete, and when you're done, they'll call me to go fight him. And there's confidence in himself too, which I noticed when he said, I will stick my head into Anderson's chest, put my legs around him, shooting for a double, and that's the end of round number 1. And then that's the end of round number 2. And it was like this newer, confident, more vocal, outspoken Chael appeared. And I found it very entertaining, being a pro wrestling fan, being a fan of boxers like Muhammad Ali and Floyd Mayweather. I enjoy that rap, and I understand what that does, especially when you're in a sport like MMA or boxing, or in an entertainment-based sport like pro wrestling. You need those kind of people that know how to talk and generate interest in what they do. And I'll tell you this, and I remember an interview from way back in the day, and let me just quickly sip this. I better make this quick, got someone beeping me on Skype, but I'll never forget this. Chael, the idea of Chael versus Anderson Silva came out, and everybody said, this was years before, this was like a year before, I don't think that fight will do well in terms of pay-per-view buy rates. And when that fight happened, with all the things that Chael said about Anderson, apparently that pay-per-view overachieved, and it did more than what they realised, and I believe it did somewhere in the region of 600,000 to 700,000 buys, which was a lot for an Anderson Silva fight, and surpassed expectations for what people really believed it was going to do. And I base it on 2 things. Chael's mouth and how he handled himself. Actually, 3 things. Chael's mouth, how Anderson Silva was perceived at the time, and the fact that a lot of people, like myself, a lot of people ordered the replay because of the performance of Chael Sonnen. And I wasn't surprised by the fight at all. I always felt that a wrestler would give Anderson his hardest fight, and that has happened. Dan Henderson and then Chael Sonnen. And Chael was taking him down and beat him up for 4.5 to almost 5 rounds, and then got caught with a submission. And then unfortunately things happened with the Chael Sonnen, the TRT and getting suspended. And most people, as unfortunate as that was, most people would not understand or wouldn't know how to use that to their advantage. And Chael, he was off for a while, then he came back, and then he started talking about that in such an unashamed way, like he was almost proud of it, that it kind of added to the character. When he said that the commission don't order, they don't shorten suspensions, and when they do, that's their way of saying, I'm sorry, we were wrong. It was just like, oh my god, this man is crazy. But it was very funny, and it was very entertaining, and it got me interested in him, and I was more interested in seeing a Chael Sonnen than I was in anybody else, to the point where I wanted to see Chael skip past Vitor Belfort and fight Anderson in the second rematch in 2011, and unfortunately it didn't happen. Chael came back, fought Brian Stan, and I think he was very engaging in a very different way, but it still worked, and he won in that fight by submission, came back, fought Michael Bisping. Again, that was a very, very close fight, by the way, and I think I could... Anyways, enough about that. But the thing is, in all of that time between those fights, leading into the second Anderson fight, the Chael Sonnen persona was almost coming to the point where he was the face of the UFC, where people who I know in my area who are not UFC fans knew who he was, and they liked the talk and how he was talking, and the things he said, bordering that Muhammad Ali, Floyd Mayweather, superstar Billy Graham level of tremendous verbal skills, was drawing them in, and that's an important aspect of, I think, MMA, and there's a lesson to be learned there. And what I'm getting at is, I think that Chael Sonnen I think he did the right things, and a lot of, if you want to say, purists and these, this is a sport and it should be treated as a sport and we should shake hands, and I do like to see respect in any kind of sport, But when they start going, oh, Chael's ruining the sport, Chael Sonnen is killing the sport, this is bad for the sport, yet they're doing 700,000 buys when he talks, yet they're doing over 1 million buys, and it's generating money and publicity, and this is good for other fighters, yet they keep saying it's bad for the sport, and oh, he's so hated. If people really hated somebody, they wouldn't pay to see you. If they want to see you lose, that's one thing, but if they despise you, like genuinely despise you, as people like Misha Tate were claiming in an interview, then he wouldn't be around. And what I'm getting at is there is a lesson to be learnt there, and you see guys like Tito Ortiz, who people have divided opinions on him, and granted I just took a shot at him, people like Frank Shamrock, people like Josh Barnett, people like Daniel Cormier, who's starting to get this, a lot of fighters, they're using the other aspect of MMA, and that is if you want to say, knowing how to be engaging and knowing how to have that magnetism, so more people are interested in seeing you fight. And when you have those kind of things, it gets you to places a lot quicker. And I'll tell you this, while John Fitch does not necessarily have to talk shit about Georges St. Pierre, and no one would expect him to, he did need to, and I think this, had he been a little bit more magnetic, had he had a bit more of that engaging with the audience, my belief is that he would have had that shot. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted for a second. Better not be a fucking fox. I swear I scored it with my tea. But what I'm getting at is, had someone like a John Fitch been more engaging and had more to sell this time, then I think that we would have seen Fitch in the rematch and probably still in the UFC. There's a reason why he isn't in there. There isn't that demand, and I felt that a guy like a John Fitch needed to do something like that. And that's probably why Koscheck got there ahead of he did. And that's probably why someone like Chael Sonnen will get opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, because of how he is and how he engages himself and the things that he did. And everyone's like, oh, well, this guy's a jerk and disrespectful, blah, blah, blah. And when the Ultimate Fighter came around and he coached against John Jones, I think everyone prior to that thought, and I think a lot of people got respect for Chael after that, by the way, because when that UFC 151 incident did happen, Chael did back up his word, and he did say, I'll fight John Jones, when other people didn't want to do it. And other people said, oh, well, we want a 10-week camp, and we want to do this, and we want to do that. And Chael said, no, I'll fly in right now, and I'll do the fight. And I think people gained some kind of respect for Chael. But then when they had the two of them, coach the Ultimate Fighter, I think a lot of people expected Chael to be this loudmouth, shit-talk John Jones, blah, blah, blah. And I think Chael was very, very smart. And when he did the Ultimate Fighter, he showed another side of the Chael Sonnen personality that we didn't know. We saw a very compassionate, very intelligent, very charismatic, very engaging man that had a very likeable side to him. And he, again, I think that really helped the show. And I think, again, he's now got 2 losses in a row. And normally for some people, if they get 1 loss, they're out the company. And Chael's got 2 losses in a row, yet people still want to see him. And again, what I'm getting at is there's a lesson to be learned. And this is why I respect a Chael Sonnen. This is why I respect a Tito Ortiz. This is why I respect someone like a Josh Barnett, who really should be in the UFC, by the way. This is why I respect those kind of people. They don't necessarily have to talk trash and talk bad and say nasty things about people. And even a Daniel Cormier, who does this very well, but they have that magnetism. They've worked on projecting that charisma. They've worked on how to be more and more engaging. And as a result of that, they're just going to have... They're going to get to where they want to a lot quicker than anyone else. Jason Mayhem Miller was another example of this. He was not the best fighter in his weight class, but he got a lot of publicity. And he was actually one of the most famous fighters outside of the UFC for quite a long time. And I know people who don't, watch MMA but know who he is. So again, I'm going to stop and I'm going to tell you to wrap up that my thoughts on Chael Sonnen are this: when people say he's bad for the sport, he's not, and you have to remember this. This is not a jiu-jitsu meet, a jiu-jitsu tournament or a wrestling meet. This is a spectator sport, and you do need to have some of those additional things to help to get you up there quicker, and that's what I'm getting at. Anyways, I'm drying out. I'm going to stop right now. I think I've got part 2 because I want to talk at some point about the most overrated match in history, WrestleMania history. And I think everyone who knows me knows what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to stop, press that stop button. If you haven't seen me before, Comment, rate, subscribe, do whatever you want. Share the video. I do videos on MMA. If you like pro wrestling too, I do videos on that. I did see the boxing. I'll probably talk about that. I got a ton to talk about. It's like about God knows how much material. Anyways, I'm talking too much and I'm talking too fast, and I think this lass is not happy with me because I've aired her for 15 minutes. Right, stop. Comment, rate, subscribe, share, do what you want, do what you like. God bless you all. Take care. Peace.